another episode of Student of the Game. I'm with Mitch Kruse, who probably doesn't need many introductions here around Fort Wayne, Indiana, and across the nation. If you're into cars, collector cars, sports cars, anything that of value, you know the Kruse family name. But Mitch, thanks for being here today.
Thank you. It's an honor.
This is a blessing to me because I've known you. I've known of you for a long time. I've known you for a long time. But I'd love to just talk about you and your story. This is a small business podcast. We want to bless people with behind the scenes of sometimes it looks easy. When you're watching somebody have some success, it looks easy. But to tell their story and to tell what they've gone through and to learn, I believe life has clues. So, do you mind sharing a little bit of your story, where Kruse International, where that started? As a young age, how old were you when you got started in the auction business?
Well, I'll share enough mistakes that you'll wonder how this ever worked out.
I think that's what people want to hear, right? Because it makes themselves feel a little better about themselves.
I grew up in an auctioneer family. In 1952, my grandfather's farm flooded, and his father-in-law, my grandma's dad, clerked and cashiered Production Credit Association farm auctions, and he was famous. He would actually take the money, not just record the bid price, the item on a clerk sheet, but he would actually take the money at the same time. So he would clerk and cashier as he would go. And he said to my grandfather, he said, "This happens about every 7 years in farming. And this is the low area on 24 and 69. We all drive by it all the time." Mm-hmm. And he has fish swimming where his crops should be. And he said, "So maybe you ought to try being an auctioneer." Well, it worked for him. He did really well. And fast forward to 1959, my dad was a senior in high school at Leo High School, and he played sports, and he thought he was going to have a professional baseball career. And he made a deal with his principal. He said, "If I keep my grades up, can I work with my dad full time?" My dad also would become a state senator and a politician, so you kind of see how this all works. So
he was great at sales early on in high school.
He was, yeah. So it worked. It went really well. In the 1960s, they started pioneering selling multiple pieces or parcels of real estate at auction. And then in 1971, I believe, I can't believe how fast time goes, they held the first annual consignment collector car auction, and it was in Auburn, Indiana, behind a Dairy Queen. On State Road 8 in Auburn, Indiana back then, there was...
How many cars?
Good question, 75. And I'm going to tell you about how this all started for me. So there were only three things, I think, on the strip back then, and that was Penguin Point, a gas station, and Dairy Queen. And now, it's got all kinds of development. But my dad and I were going to the auction, so I'm about, I'm 6 years old. And it's funny, I can picture this big Timex watch I had on. And we're on our way to the auction, and Dad said there must be a car accident. And so he takes a different route. And he said, "Man, it must have hit a train." And so we get on I-69, and back then you could kind of see down on the exit as it would crest at a hill on the interstate. And my dad said this, "Holy smokes, everybody's coming to the auction." What my grandfather had done is he talked to NBC National News, and they had run a story on it. And so 15,000 people came to this auction of 75 collector cars. And I remember watching on the news at home that night on NBC National News, and they said two fools met in Auburn, Indiana, because Duesenberg brought $60,000, and at the most one had ever sold back then was for $10,000, and the majority would have been $5,000 or under. So this is just like crazy stuff. And my dad was looking for something that was a little more exciting, and so he started this concept of annual consignment collector car auctions all over the country. I got forced into being an auctioneer. I'm probably naturally a little more introverted, and I remember in the cellar with a microphone, and my dad forced me to auction these jars, and I wouldn't do it unless the people couldn't see me. So I would auction $1, $2, that kind of thing. And I just got thrown into the fire. And that's my background, is really just getting thrown into it. And, hey, this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life.
How old were you when you got your license?
I was 18. I actually was the youngest licensed realtor in the nation because I passed the test when I was 17. They held my license for me until 18, so I can't get any younger. And then I was 18 when I got my auctioneer's license too.
Oh my goodness. Well, the Kruse family name, I remember stories of my grandfather, Ms. Lehman Realtors and Auctioneers in Bern. He was 55 years in the business, and he's my mentor and the reason that I got into real estate. And I remember, and I don't know a lot of stories. Obviously, my grandfather's not telling me everything, but I remember he went and I think worked for your father and grandfather quite a bit. And even, in talking about having you on the show, I talked to my dad and he's like, oh, that's where I got my real estate license from. I think Russell maybe, did his class. But I think there's a lot of lessons in this. The first thing I hear is, he created his own market, essentially. You have 72 things to sell and you have 15,000 people showing up. There's a reason why, supply and demand works. And if you're listening to this and you have products that you're selling or services that you're selling, I think that's what everybody wants is a line out the door. But that happened right away. What happened after it aired on the news? Like you said, it's international and you started to go and be the leader in consignment auctions. How fast did that take off?
Really fast. And part of what was going on is the only way you could really sell a collector car, in fact, that term didn't even exist back then, but was through a private sale. And Hemmings Motor News was around, Old Cars Weekly was around, but it would usually be at a show where you would sell your car. So it almost took collector cars from being unlisted stocks to putting them on the big board. And the marketing in the marketplace growing rapidly led to quickly appreciating values, which actually led to a great big problem. You could buy a car at an auction, say in St. Louis, one weekend, fix it up, and sell it maybe 2 or 3 weeks later in San Diego, and you'd make a profit. And so what happened is my dad, his two brothers, and his father started financing the buyers because it kind of didn't matter. Everything was going up. Everybody's smart. And what happened is when they encountered a little bit of a recession and people didn't pay back, they had a real problem. They had a real challenge on getting sellers paid. And so my dad in the 70s, late 70s, bought his brother and his two brothers and his dad out for $1 each. And so that really started to get my attention is maybe this isn't what I'm going to do for my life. And I had to really wrestle with that through high school. I thought maybe I'd be a doctor of some kind, a lawyer, a chiropractor. I wanted to syndicate real estate. I had all kinds of thoughts on that. But maybe looking back at it now in the rearview mirror, God had some other plans for me.
So you ended up exiting the business and selling, but what was that time horizon like? How long did you spend in the auction business?
Well, it was 1999. So I graduated from high school in '83, got my degree from Indiana University in Fort Wayne. I married my wife our sophomore year, and she became an elementary school teacher. And in 1985, I sold the first car to ever trade hands for $1 million cash. It was documented. And Tom Monahan, owner of Domino's Pizza, bought it, and he took delivery at home plate in Tiger Stadium, and it was really cool. When they kicked the supercharger in center field where it came in through the wall, to see the pride in him was really cool. It was really fun. He purchased another Duesenberg at auction a couple weeks later from us for $1 million, which was a world's record for a car sold at auction. And so I really hit the ground running, doing really well. And I got better as an auctioneer, and then over time, became the premier auctioneer of collector cars in the world. And we had about 50 annual events. I formed a new company my senior year of college after I graduated, and I wanted to restore the Kruse auction business in the collector car world, and we sold real estate and aircraft and collectibles and all kinds of things at auction. But we had about 50 annual collector car auctions. Plus, if somebody owned a collection and wanted to sell it all, or there was an estate, we would do that as well. And I'm telling you, from about 87 to 90, it was straight up, and I thought I was God's gift to the collector car auction business. On July 1st, 1990, it was like somebody turned the lights out in the economy. There was a recession, and we did about 20 to 25% less volume that year. 91 was 25% less. So now we're geared up for this particular volume, and we're selling almost half that. We made it the first year because people were selling their cars because the economy was tough. But on July 1st, 1992, I have no idea how we're going to make payroll. I'm really struggling. And you just can't make this up. The IRS raided us because they thought we were money launderers. I couldn't even conceive the concept that they thought we had done. And I learned about, I bet it was 10 years later, I learned that they knew within 30 days they'd made a big mistake. But nobody wanted to risk his or her career by signing off and saying, whoops, we have a problem. They weren't money launderers. What they were confused by was that our Labor Day weekend event, we now had a permanent facility on I-69. It was about a 400-acre auction park, and we had other live events there too. We were the third largest crowd drawing event in Indiana. And then when the Brickyard 400 started, we were fourth. But those large cash deposits from the gate receipts, I guess that's what they thought was money laundering. So on July 1st, 1992, I go to my home after dealing with all that. And the first call I made was to my uncle, who was an attorney, and he came out and he was able to figure out really quickly what was going on. I get on my knees beside my bed that night. I had surrendered my life to Christ when I was 9 years old. And now I'm 27, and I get on the knees beside my bed, and I said, God, I know better than to make a deal with you. You don't have to get me out of anything. But I guess ironically that it wasn't worth much. I was willing to surrender my business to him. And I didn't know really what I was asking, but I said, God, I want to make my business a ministry. That next day, I went to meet with my uncle, attorney, in his law office. And I remember going up the back steps into this second floor where it was unfinished, and there were bookshelves all around. And he had read most of them. He was a unique guy. He was the most accepting person I knew and the most righteous person I knew. And so I went there at a card table in folding chairs. I confessed my worst sins. And he asked me a question that changed my life forever. He said, Mitchell, have you ever thought about changing the scorecard of your life from money to wisdom? I knew Solomon had asked for it, but I didn't know what he was really talking about. Mm-hmm. And I remember saying this after he described, he said, wisdom is really God's righteousness intersecting with street smarts. And I said this, I said, if God cares about a collector car auction, I need to know. Because I had gone on autopilot and believed the God thing to be just be good, do right. But if my business would become a ministry, what would that look like? And that was really intriguing to me. It began this insatiable desire for the scriptures for me. I started reading the Bible in its entirety, cover to cover, every year. I started studying all kinds of stuff and read all kinds of business books, but nothing had compared to the Bible, and specifically Proverbs on business. So that radically changed my life. And over the next 7 or 8 years, to answer your question, it was like the Job thing. What God did from that point on, he restored relationships. I learned that relationship was more important than remuneration. I learned that people were more important than profit. And I did everything radically differently than what I had done before. I even changed the mission statement of our business to serving God and serving others. I started putting near the postal indicia on our few million brochures that we printed every year, a Proverbs Bible verse, or I might put that serving God and serving others. Nobody ever got upset about it. It was interesting. But I learned that the world flocked to somebody that was willing to put their needs ahead of your own. and that radically transformed our business. And then in 1999, we were able to sell to eBay. And I felt God wanting me to be a carrier of the message. I could have stayed. And I think in many ways, our culture, a good business person would say, I should have stayed. But I had felt God had done so much in me, and he actually had spared me from a car accident, in my opinion. And he really got my attention, and it wasn't an audible voice, but I almost felt like this impression on my chest that it was time to go be a carrier of the message I had experienced in the marketplace.
That is an unbelievable story. I've known parts of that, but not all of it. So it's great to hear you go through that. I want to go back a little bit to some of the promotion. I want to get to, at the end of the day, we want to know, what does winning at the game of life look like for you? And I think what you did is you just gave us a snapshot of, in that time period, how you got to where you are today. But let's go back to the promotional stuff. You talked about, Monahan buying that car and taking it on in the baseball stadium. Like, I think it was P.T. Barnum that said something terrible happens without promotion. Nothing.
Is it true?
And so talk about, speak to the person who is starting their business that, there's social media, there's all these ways in which you can promote. Like, how was that just like innate? Did you and your family just have that gift of promotion? Like, you're the youngest person to sell $1 million car. I mean, just think about you back then having social media, posting and telling everybody, you just sold $1 million car. How did you promote, and what was your mindset like to promote not just your business, the cars, your clients? What'd that look like?
Yeah, it was radically different than it is now. But I'm going to tie it all together. We had a customer list of about 400,000 people. So direct mail was enormous for us. And it's making a huge comeback now because people's inboxes are so flooded on email. I think almost every deal I did, booking a guy's collection for an auction, a real estate for an auction, almost everything was in person. I had to fly everywhere. I flew all over the country. I flew all over the world. There was no such thing as Zoom and all those kinds of things. So face-to-face, how you presented yourself, locking eyes, connecting, really, really huge in what I did. And then not to mention, like when you're auctioning, it's 500,000, you want to get 750. Are you bidding, Brad? Noll, that kind of thing. You're actually doing that in front of thousands in an audience. So it really was kind of the same thing, but two different audience sizes on doing a deal and then actually auctioning. And what was unique about us is we were the actual auctioneers. So the principals were the auctioneers. That wasn't that way in virtually any other collector car auction company. Nobody was crazy enough to try to do what we did. And we have like 50 annual ones a year. But it was interesting. I think it made it different, a different feel about it. And then we didn't buy and sell. So you weren't bidding against us if there was a really good deal, that kind of a thing.
Let me ask this real quick. Did you feel at the time, and maybe without knowing it, did you have like an alter ego where, you've got a pregame meal before you auction, you psych yourself up, you go into character? Like, how do you get to, you're a performer at that point, right? You're performing on stage. It's like a puppet master where you're trying to get the audience, to lock in. You're trying to, gain their attention, to keep them focused, and then ultimately to bid, as high as possible so your customer wins. Did you have that like character that you went on stage with? You talked about, being a little bit of an introvert.
Yes, is the answer to that question. It's very insightful. After July 1st, 1992, it was far less self-centered than it had been prior to that. I would do three things: word, worship, workout before an auction. So I wanted to get the endorphins flowing and that norepinephrine, and you had this relaxed energy. So I'd always do a workout before an auction. And then I was reading through the Bible in its entirety. I read a chapter a day in Proverbs that corresponded with the date of the month, something I still do to this day. And I wanted the word to basically be able to flow out of me. And then back then, what I did is I went into Anchor Room, if everybody remembered that, and I bought a lot of cassette tapes back then in '92, and I would listen to Stephen Curtis Chapman and Michael W. Smith and people like that. And today, I'm really into worship music and the new cutting edge worship music. But that was my routine. And it was a little bit at first as stepping into a role for me. But as I studied the Bible, I realized how authenticity, which I would define as reflecting the design of the designer, is so powerful. In fact, it was the most powerful word in our postmodern culture. We tend to deconstruct. So we start peeling away the layers. Is Brad the same with me today that he was with that audience yesterday? And what's it like? And when we're in the car alone, is he like, and we deconstruct. But authenticity is the one thing that becomes more and more powerful the more people deconstruct and they get to the core of who you are. When it's the same, when you're the same all the way through, when you're consistent, when you're reflecting the design of the designer, it's powerful. And so that's what I tried to do.
Wow. We talk about that on our team a lot, and I try to talk to my kids, like, as we're all sinners, we believe, everybody kind of has three sides to them: who you're with people, who you're with at home, and then who you're with, who you are alone. Really, who are you? And because when you're dealing with the public, and for all of us here, that's, trying to be leaders and salespeople and stewards, you're dealing with different personalities at different times. And I think it's most of the work that needs to be done, right, is on ourselves before we can go and serve other people. We on this podcast, we talk about mastering the fundamentals, okay? And I picked up on a couple clues, but what do you think were the fundamentals for you to have the success you did in the auction business?
I would say communicating, connecting, marketing, and then you actually have to develop the auction skill in what I did. So I'd say those four things. An auction company, and Brad, you know this, you're the same, is a marketing organization. Like, if you don't bring buyers and sellers together well, the buyers aren't going to have anything to buy and the sellers aren't going to be too happy. And so it's a challenge. Like, the overhead of all of that rested on us in the consignment part of it. If you have an estate or a man's lifelong collection and these prized possessions, marketing those were vital to having him or her feel good about it all and having it all work well. And the cool thing about an auction, let's say we're selling a collection all at no reserve, selling regardless of price, the highest bidder. A bidder knows that they're only bidding one increment higher than the runner-up bidder, if they end up being the buyer. And the seller knows that everybody who was interested came together and bid that day against each other. So it's really a beautiful picture of the marketplace.
Sure. And those fundamentals, I mean, we talk about all the time, like dribble, pass, and shoot. Doesn't matter if you're in middle school or the NBA or the WNBA, dribble, pass, and shoot, is fundamental. And I think what you're saying, with marketing, communication, connection, I think in today's world, it's so different in terms of how we're teaching people to connect. I mean, you talked about flying across the country so you could lock eyes with somebody. What would be your advice today to the younger generation that's maybe getting their start? I've had a couple phone calls from people graduating college. My daughter's in college, just got a real estate license last year. You talked about being 18. She had to take the test. She had to be 18. She had to graduate high school. But talk to the younger generation about those fundamentals. What advice would you have for somebody just starting off today, especially when it comes to connecting with others? Well,
you can't do any of those things unless you listen. And I'm writing a new book on communication, and it's predominantly listening. You really have to listen because language or words, they're an expression of the heart, and people are usually not really good at expressing what's in their hearts. And so you don't really listen to just the words that are being said. You listen to the desires underneath and what they're really saying. And so we really have to be tremendous listeners. And in this generation, I have 4 daughters, 4 adult daughters, and I'm shocked at the vacuum of communicators. I'm just shocked. I'm shocked when you walk into a business of any kind and you get, hello. You get somebody that doesn't even like look at you. I can't tell you how many restaurants I've been at where, they're looking down, they're looking at their phones, and they barely acknowledge you. My goodness gracious. I couldn't sell one single thing ever by doing that. It wouldn't work. It doesn't work.
It wouldn't work, would it?
No. And I just, nothing happens in an economy until something's sold. And I really think communication is going to be, and connecting is going to be the highest skill set rewarded in our culture, because the internet has almost ruined it. You would think it would help it with Zoom and Microsoft Teams and all. It's almost killed it, and it's a dying art. And so if you can communicate, if you can listen, if you can lock eyes, if you can smile, if your nonverbal cues, your tone of voice, your body gesture, your facial expressions, your hand gestures, your body posture, if that indicates I'm interested in you and I want to help you, my goodness. Combine that with work hard, work smart, and you're gonna have tremendous success.
You would do fine. I remember reading a book by Tony Schwartz, The Powerful Engagement, and he talked about how energy is a currency, right? And I think you're talking about that with connecting. Yes. It takes no energy to sit on your couch and to text somebody. It takes no energy to sit on your couch and direct message somebody. But I think what you're talking about really, Mitch, is the transfer of energy.
Yes.
It's, are you excited to see me? Are you engaged with what I have to say, right? And I couldn't agree more that, listening is one of the most powerful tools in connecting and communicating. We transition from mastering the fundamentals because in every business, there's clues that are out there. This podcast, Student of the Game, was started because I tell people I have a master's degree in business, but it came from the locker room. Yeah. Everything I know about business is from my days of being in a locker room, of leadership and being on time management, hard work, dedication, listening, trusting your teammates, showing up early, staying late, all those things. And when I got into real estate, I started to learn, I can grow my real estate practice by watching the medical professionals. I can grow my real estate practice by watching the attorneys in how they specialize. So we've been a beneficiary of the ripple effects of how everybody else works. And so I like to talk about what was fundamental in your business, because I know whoever's listening, they can adopt those same principles. One of the things that I enjoy talking about the most is falling in love with practice. There's so many things that when we see success and we set goals and we want to achieve, or we're inspired by somebody, a lot of times that inspiration is coming from the success, not the blood, sweat, and the tears. And so falling in love with practice, I tell my kids this, I tell my team this: you can be as good as you want in anything if you love to practice. If you truly love to practice something. So when it came to that auction business that you became massively successful in, what are some of the things that you absolutely love to do that maybe people, when they would hear that, they would like, yeah, I don't think I'm going to sign up for that?
Well, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. And John Wooden said that everyone should strive for perfection. Perfection is unattainable, but striving for perfection is attainable. And so what I did in my life is I started asking myself the question, what process would I do if the end result didn't matter? And that really was an aha moment for me on the things that I loved and the things that I loathed. I loved connecting buyer and seller. I loved getting to know people. I loved people. I loved marketing. I loved doing the plan to market, like our annual Labor Day weekend event, for example. That marketing concept was so complex. And then once I got you on our property, I wanted it to be a tremendous experience for you. So I really loved putting that whole plan together. And that in and of itself is so much work that I think you could talk somebody out of ever wanting to do that. But I really, really enjoyed that piece of it. And I enjoyed the people, and I really enjoyed the deal making. But it was a lot of work. I mean, a lot of work. And then what you talked about earlier of being on stage and having to be on all the time. It's like a surgeon. You cannot have a car off. You cannot, it doesn't happen. And that's partially what led to workaholism for me. But you got to be on all the time.
Wow. How many cars did you auction at a time, like in a row, without taking a break?
That's a really good question. Because of what I just said, we would trade about every 20 cars, but I remember once in California, I auctioned the entire group of cars. So that probably was about an 8 or 9 hour time period.
Wow.
Maybe I'd say, hey, I'm going to run to the restroom. You want to say something about this real quick? But the reason I brought that up is I don't think I did that day. And I remember drinking a lot of water because you're talking, you never stop talking. Yeah. And it was interesting. Like, it just happened. It was an amazing day. At a consignment collector car auction, if you sell half or more, you're doing really well. That day, we sold like 80 or 90%. It was unreal. I got so many auction stories that we could talk literally for days.
I bet you do, and I'm sure we all want to hear them. But so falling in love with practice, has to do what I heard you say is really it's a posture of the heart.
Yes.
It's serving people. It's what I got out of that is, yes, you want to make deals, but you also want to serve people. And to me, that's like, when you go to a nice hotel, that's the mints on the pillow. Mm-hmm. It's the turn down service. You go out to dinner and you come back and there's a bottle of water sitting on your nightstand, mm-hmm. Because they want you to be hydrated, when you sleep. And so, it's the things that we obsess about. And I love what you talked about with Wooden saying, it's chasing perfection. It's not falling in love with perfection. It's falling in love with chasing perfection, just like it's the pursuit of happiness. Yeah. It's not, my goal is not to be happy. It's the pursuit of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that those action words, those verbs are extremely important. And those are the things that, I just want to encourage the listener that, you're building your small business. And, it's funny, after 23 years, I still have things that I love that nobody else would sign up for. I still, last quarter, was struggling. We didn't sell as many homes as we want to, but when you fall in love with the practice, yes, and you can detach yourself from the results, I just feel like there's some energy that you have that you can't sell. You can't package that up. You can't buy it off the shelf, and it's kind of the fool's gold if you think it's all about the results. So thank you for sharing about that. Transition a little bit, because we could talk about the auction business and your success and everything you've experienced. You've sold a lot of cars for a lot of famous people, I bet. Mm-hmm. Any memorable stories meeting people? When they say that you don't want to meet your hero because you'll probably be disappointed, but anybody you met that you were kind of starstruck? I
was never disappointed. Celebrities, by and large, were just wonderful people. Jay Leno was probably the most genuine person, as much as anybody I'd ever been around. And for like uber famous, was so kind. So kind. He's a wonderful human being, and just loved hanging out with him. And I could just replicate that over and over. I really wasn't disappointed with any of the celebrities, and there were tons that would come to our events over the course of the year.
That's great. As we wrap up, we talk about winning at the game of life, right? I mean, there's the fundamentals you start off with. Everybody has to have fundamentals in your business. You got to master those fundamentals, and then you got to fall in love with the practice. But I don't think we all just do this because we wake up and it's Groundhog Day and we're on repeat, mm-hmm. rinse and repeat every single day. As people that believe that we have some untapped potential, we want to win. We want to have that success. Winning at the game of life. Where are you at right now with winning at the game of life? What does winning mean for you?
Well, I really feel like Jesus answered that question in John 17:3. And he said that, in essence, the meaning of life is to know God and to know Christ. And know is not mental assent, it's to experience. It actually means intimacy. It's an experiential connection of my innermost being with God's. And at the end of the day, if you get that wrong, you're dead. And so it is the fundamental, most important thing, and it will affect absolutely every single part of your life, unlike any other thing will. And so I think that's it in a nutshell, is to know God. That's what we were created for. We're hardwired for that. And so this intimacy with the Holy Spirit and a relationship with God affects all of our relationships with other people. And relationship is paramount to God. He's not about religion. No, he's not about religion at all. He's about relationship. And that means that my relationship with God might look a little different than someone else's because he knows us. He put us together. We're unique. Every single person is unique. And when we surrender our lives to him, we're a unique expression of Christ. I got two illustrations coming to me, and I really want to share both. But let me start with the car one. Surrender the old, surrender the pieces, surrender the new. We get deep inside of us that we're not perfect, we're not flawless. And all of us recognize that there's something that needs to be made new again. And so for that to happen, we're either going to self-restore, and that doesn't work out very well, or we're going to surrender our lives to the restorer, just like a car collector would surrender his car to the restorer. We surrender the old basket case of our lives. And the very first thing the restorer does when they restore an automobile is they take it apart and they restore it piece by piece. And that's what God does with us. And so we have to surrender the pieces. Surrender says to God, I can't, you can. I can't restore my own life. I can't make myself new again. God in Christ, you can. And then the restorer will reassemble that vehicle and it goes out to shows. And we surrendered the new. So new tragedies, new triumphs. We don't get everything right all the time. So Restoration Road, I like to say, is 2 steps forward, oftentimes 1 step back. So when a car is taken out for a show, a collector car, is the paint going to fade? Is the metal going to get dinged? Is the leather going to get tattered? Yes. But it's another opportunity to go to the one who makes things new. And so restore the old, surrender the old, surrender the pieces, surrender the new in order to experience new life in Christ the way he designed it. And that's what I've tried to do from that night beside my bed on July 1st, 1992 to now, is to be a carrier of that message of restoration, to experience God's grace, his undeserved love, his unmerited favor, and his wisdom, God's heart intersecting with street smarts. It's a picture of the cross to take place in every single aspect of our lives.
That's a fantastic depiction of winning, but also wisdom. And I think wisdom is winning. And I do have to go back and thank you for sharing that. I could tell your heart. But here's my question. Laced in everything that you do, I see a marketer that stays on brand with a lot of your material. Right, Restoration Road, like a lot of your stuff. Now it seems like, you're very deep. You're a thinker, which also means you've put a lot of work in, right? And so that work is now being brought to the marketplace over the last couple decades, but you've packaged it in a way that continues to make you, the car guy, the car industry, the automobile industry, the classic industry, Restoration Road. Is there a strategy? Talk to the business owners a little bit, because it sounds like there was a rebirth, but you still packaged it in a way that was on brand.
You were really insightful. What I wanted to do is communicate what I just shared about the similarities between how God restores us and how a collector car is restored. And the reason is, I think that we as people that walk this earth hear religion a lot, and we get told that religion, or we catch at least because of our preconceived notions that religion is the answer. And again, it's not. It's a relationship. We are not going to be flawless on this side. Our lives are going to be filled with mistakes. And so I just tried to use illustrations that I knew and I experienced that I thought would connect with the audience. And I found out in a hurry that you do a message on forgiveness, oh my goodness, you better be ready for some response, because everybody is carrying around something. Everybody. Yeah. It's mind-boggling. And then I wanted to figure out a way. I think our culture doesn't quite get the idea of sin. I passed a billboard on the way here that talked about sin. I think there'd be a lot of people, the majority of people have no biblical background or church background whatsoever. It's radically different than when I was a kid. It's almost flip-flopped. Yeah. And so I think sin's hard to understand, but knowing that I'm for a culture that's never really heard about it much. But understanding that I fall short, that I don't get everything right all the time, and you start talking in the way that you meet them where they are, what Paul said, and you connect with everybody. And that's just what I tried to do.
Well, it's a through line in a lot of your material. Street smarts from Proverbs. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. Here's the other illustration I really wanted to share, and it's really fitting for you. There's in the 30 sayings of the wise in Proverbs, there's this concept about a house. A house is built with, I'm going to paraphrase it, with wisdom as the foundation. It's established or built up through understanding, and its rooms are filled with rare and beautiful treasures, and that's knowledge. So I call that the house of leadership, because house in Hebrew means any family, any organization, any movement. So let's think about this for a minute. So any movement, we got to first dig down with the footer of humility. And humility is bending the knees in my heart, first to God and then to others, even in family, in friendships, in nonprofits, in social media, in business transactions. I wanted to make it a point where I would worship God the most, where others expected it the least, and that was in a business transaction. So you dig down with the footer of humility, and then you have the foundation of wisdom. I've defined that already. It's the vertical intersecting with the horizontal. It's God's heart intersecting with street smarts. It's how to make sense of my faith, literally make it sticky to everything that I do. And then establish, or the framework of understanding. Understanding is insight. People who would probably not think much about God or the Bible, they might talk about emotional intelligence. It's a lot bigger than that. Insight is being able to reach inside somebody and to see what's there, and that only happens through the currency of the Holy Spirit. And then knowledge, again, in Hebrew and in Greek, it's not mental assent. It's a relationship. It's intimacy. It's my innermost being connected with God's and then with others. And the rare and beautiful treasures in the house of leadership are relationships. That's a huge paradigm shift in our Western culture. And that transformed my business. It transformed my life. And I'm hoping that, I have 6 grandchildren now, a 7th on the way. I'm hoping that my legacy is in them by living out what God has done in me.
Man, that's on purpose. I love it. Just this morning, I want to humble myself and say this book does not come out every single day, but Wisdom for the Road. I did pick up today, April 24th. It says strongest steel, hottest fire. The strongest steel is made in the hottest fire. I don't know why you put that for April 24th, but I tell you what, I needed to hear that this morning.
Man. I tell you what you made me think of is I handed that to a friend. I was blessed to be a co-founding board member of Love Fort Wayne. And this movement of God in our community is just incredible. I was handing out these hot off the press, these one-year devotionals to the board. Larry Lance goes, "What's today's date?" "Oh, here it is." And he turns to that page and he goes, "Are you caught in your sin?" Slams it shut, goes, "I don't like it already."
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Well, before we hit record, I shared with you one of my favorite quotes, which is very similar. It's, our goal here on our team is to comfort those that are afflicted and to afflict those that are a little comfortable. And that reminds me of that. So, Mitch, thanks for sharing today. Before we wrap up, I can't echo your sentiments enough. I mean, I love the hustle and the grind, and I think the grind culture right now is missing what you have to share right now, which is all about relationships. And in my faith tradition, I think what you just described is, relationship is at the center, of where we need to posture our hearts. But because relationships win, in the game of life, relationships win. The kids say, give this man his flowers. I'm going to give you some flowers today and say thanks for being on this podcast. I've really enjoyed listening to you. I've really enjoyed asking a couple questions here. But in your journey, who's somebody you want to send some flowers to? Who's somebody that's impacted your life?
Brad, first of all, I want to thank you because you are a treasure to our community, and so is Lindsay and your family, and just thank you so much. I'm going to give flowers to two people. One is your grandfather. Your grandfather taught me how to work the ring. And I remember one of the most important things he told me was, if you're asking somebody to bid, I'll try to make this work on camera, you ask with an open hand. I think that is so indicative of how a soft heart and an open hand go together in the Bible. And I know your grandfather's a man of faith, and it's difficult to describe the value of learning from someone like him. And I remember before he taught me, my grandfather said, Ms. Lehman's the best ringman in the world. You're going to learn from the best. And so I did. The second person is my uncle attorney I mentioned here in the podcast. Again, most righteous person I knew, most accepting person I knew. Now think about those two things going together. That's unique, and that's really where God wants us to be. He wants us to follow his design. I mean, he made us. He knows what's right for us, what's best for us. And then live that out in a way that's accepting of other people, that honors other people, the life that we lock eyes with, and not an ounce of condemnation, but connecting and accepting and loving. And so I think I learned so much from him. And if he would have challenged me on this idea of wisdom being the scorecard of my life instead of money, it's hard telling where I would have ended up, because greed's a horrible thing, and it destroys, and there's never enough. Just imagine, I mean, that sounds a little bit like hell in a way, where you can never be satisfied. And so to move from a greedy heart to a generous heart is life transforming. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity of life I've had with my 4 girls and my grandchildren and my wife, and how God restored all that in my life.
That's amazing. That's such a great story. I mean, I think, even if the only people listening to this is myself and my kids, we picked out a lot. I do want to put a pin in something I told my daughter today, who's studying for her finals down at Indiana Wesleyan. Faith is an important part of our life. But I said, one of my favorite quotes I heard was, "Don't lose your sense of responsibility in the sea of God's sovereignty." He's so big, but we still have a role to play. She can't pray for a good grade. She actually has to go study, and so, my encouragement to people listening on this podcast today is, I know you hope to have a great business. I know you want some success. I know you're out there, fighting the good fight, but at the end of the day, you got to show up and take action. You got to do the work. And I think what I'm hearing, Mitch, is when you understand what your purpose is and why you've been put on this earth, the gains you're going to experience are much greater.
Brad, it's God's design for the business leaders and owners who are listening. Jesus spent 90% of his life in the marketplace. God's designed it so that you would be a priest, so that you would get God all over you. That's what a priest did, in order to get God all over others, and you do that in the marketplace. It's his design.
That's fantastic. Mitch, this has been great. Thank you. I really appreciate you being on. I know there's going to be a lot of listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please share this with a friend. Maybe screenshot this, put it on social media. People need to hear this, because what a great message. A message of success, a message of history, a message of breaking records, and a message of restoration as well. Mitch, thanks for being on today.
Thank you. Always remember, when in doubt, shoot.